not going to make this an extremely long edition of the Paradigm. I'm going to try to cut my editions down a little bit shorter than a regular 30 minutes an hour or so. But I just wanted to just, allow y'all to understand how important he was to that company. Many people see ECW for the hardcore and the glory and all that other stuff combined with it. But in actuality, it had a ton of realism involved in the company. The smarts played off a lot on to the wrestlers, and vice versa. And with Terry Funk, he was that bridge guy. You knew he had a really good wrestling background, but you also knew he was middle-aged and crazy, and a lot of that had to do with a lot of the stuff he did throughout the early portions of his career. People forget about his legendary battles with Jack Briscoe in the Florida territory and really throughout the entire world. And we mostly know the antics he did in 1989, and that was really the time when he brought hardcore wrestling into the States, which was really not seen. We hadn't seen brutal matches before, but the crazy madman stuff he was doing in '89 brought the genre to a different level that we hadn't saw in the States, and he really incorporated that into ECW. So it was a guy who had the wrestling background, but also a guy that the fans knew could really go and do hardcore wrestling. And that's why we call him the hardcore legend, because he's a guy who really helped bring that kind of model into the States and just made purists understand that, hey, wrestling fans out there could care about this kind of genre of wrestling, and it can get over. And not only did it get over, he helped get guys over with that style, combined in with some of the wrestling he was doing. I mean, the match that he had with Sabu, and the barbed wire match with Sabu, just basically almost ripped his entire bicep out. I mean, he probably, really came close to losing that entire bicep if it wasn't for, if it wasn't for a lot of the ingenuity that they did during that match, and him taping himself up with that duct tape and whatnot. But him and Terry Funk had brutal matches, but they were all believable. They all had a story. They all had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And and then that's what it really takes to not only get a match over, but also to get a character over. And Sabu, I wouldn't say was in desperate need to do that, because he was already over with the crowd. But Terry Funk and the feuds that he had with him took it to another level. And that's what I mean about Terry Funk. Just another example of this guy getting guys over. I mean, what would Shane Douglas be if Terry Funk wasn't there? I mean, Terry Funk did small things, and it's clear, you can really see this in the Beyond the Mat feature that came out around 1999. You saw a lot of the backstage stuff with a lot of the younger guys, and some of the guys who have been around for a long time but never got a break. In the WWE or in WCW or any of the major NWA promotions, independent wise, they just gravitated to Terry Funk, and they just tried to take all the wisdom that they could from him. Mick Foley is another great guy in the history of ECW who might have never ever gotten as over as he was if it wasn't for a lot of the stuff he did with Terry Funk. Terry Funk, I think, took it upon himself to mentor Mick Foley, and just with a lot of this stuff, talking to him on the road and talking to him backstage, Foley was able to do so many magnificent things inside the ring, and also a lot of the character stuff he'll do on promos. It's another facet of Terry Funk that's not discussed a lot, his promo work. Terry Funk was a very believable guy on the mic. He did some announcing in WCW during his run there, but he was also a really good talker during his earlier glory days in the NWA. And that's another thing that Mick Foley probably picked up on too. There's a lot of similarities between Mick Foley and his aggressive style in promos. Some of the aggressive stuff he would do in promos with a lot of the psychology that was spewed out that had a lot of reminiscence of a Terry Funk. And, there's no coincidence that Mick Foley is, he admires Terry Funk, and he really views Terry Funk as his hero. And, I can go on and on with a lot of the guys that Terry Funk helped out in ECW. It would just take so long, but the point is that ECW at the time, during the 1990s, was this fledgling company at the beginning, around 92 and 93. They weren't making a lot of money. And all of a sudden, you had this guy in Terry Funk who has already made a name for himself in the pro wrestling industry. He had made his millions. He had been the world's heavyweight champion for nearly 2 years. He had done movies. He had done it all. he had been to Japan to become a legend there during his time in the NWA. And a lot of the stuff that he did in a lot of the other promotions in Japan. He took the time to actually come to the States, wrestle for the small independent company, and put it over as much as he did. You know, words really can't describe what he meant to ECW. It's kind of like, I guess if you want to make an analogy, like a Ric Flair in, let's say, 1988, 1989, and 1990 in WCW. A guy who had made all his money in the business. He's rich beyond riches. But as the World Heavyweight Champion, he puts guys over and over and over. And Ric Flair did this throughout his career, but it meant more at this time when WCW wasn't making as much money as they were when they were Jim Crockett Promotions. And he puts out 5-star after 5-star after 5-star classics with Ricky Steamboat, with Sting, helping Sting to get over, helping the Great Muta to get over, doing the same stuff with Terry Funk, Lex Luger, helping him mature as a heel character and as a face character from '89 to 1990. I mean, the list goes on and on with the guys that he helped out throughout the course of those years. And I just feel the same way about Terry Funk. The only difference with Terry is that he wasn't the world champion doing it, but he was just a guy that he didn't need the belt. Of course, he won the world television title at a time, but he didn't need the belt. Didn't need it at all. But when he finally got it, it was a thank you to him to say, hey, dude, you know, you could have come into this company wanting the championship and being the top guy, and we could have still drew with that. But instead, you decided to come into this company to not only lose more times than you won, but to get these guys over in the way you work your hardcore style, combined in with a lot of the psychology work that you did during your early portions of your career, and you combine those two together and you have a hardcore legend in Terry Funk. You know, the guy was phenomenal, and I really do encourage everybody out there who's watching this to really don't take that for granted. And if you haven't heard about that yet, or you just hearing it for the first time, make sure you go and check out a lot of the good Terry Funk matches and a lot of the angles he did in ECW for those 3 years that he was really tightly affiliated with the company, born from Japan and ECW, but mostly staying in the northeastern part of this country and getting ECW over. There's no doubt in my mind that if ECW did not have Terry Funk involved in that company for those 3 years, I don't think they would have survived at all. And it's a very big tribute to this guy because he had the wrestling marks, the smarks that were there in ECW in the crowd. They knew this guy was from the old school NWA, and for the most time they'll boo guys like that, but they had so much respect for this guy because all the stuff that he did inside the business and a lot of the stuff that he did with the wrestlers behind the scenes, you know, and that's very, very important. And you could see that, you know, mature itself during a lot of the angles that ECW was doing at the time. So, you know, Terry Funk is a very important person in ECW, and people should not forget that or take it for granted. He helped out so many careers, and he also helped that promotion become the little mini powerhouse that it eventually will become during the mid to late 90s, when they were really starting to generate a lot of revenue in the small buildings in the towns and getting their TV rights and stuff like that they accumulated through syndication. So that's a very, very important part. Just keep that in mind. And if you have, like I said before, if you have an opportunity to go check out a lot of the matches and a lot of the stuff that Terry Funk, you know, did, I think you're doing a great service to yourself to understand the evolution of ECW. It wasn't the gore and the hardcore that really got the company over. It was the likes of a Terry Funk, a Mick Foley, and a lot of the other guys